Continued reading from Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita Additional Pastimes. Chapter titled, A Summer in Montreal. One of Prabhupada's reasons for coming to Canada was to get permanent residency status in both Canada and the United States. I think you read that. But just remind everyone, in case you don't know, we have Prabhupada's green card in the museum, and you can see that it was issued in Montreal in 1968. Prabhupada's fingerprints are there. They have all these details there, show where his scar is. They say he's 5'4". So a very nice little encapsulated description of Srila Prabhupada. It might be a little too loud. I mean, I don't know what it's like online, but it's a little too loud in here. It echoes. So we'll continue from where we left off. Brahmananda wrote Prabhupada from New York explaining his plan to get a lawyer and to appeal. But Prabhupada, now skeptical of U.S. lawyers who took money and resolved nothing, chose instead to make a new application as religious minister for ISKCON. Although U.S. immigration, it's way too loud. Although U.S. immigration had denied his application ostensibly on the grounds that he had been in the wrong immigration status, Srila Prabhupada suspected that the State Department was not overly fond of Indian swamis. I understand that the government of the USA is discussing with so-called swamis because they have exploited the people in so many ways. That is a fact. And if I would have been in the government, I would have also considered like that. So they have not got a very good opinion about these rascal swamis. Under the circumstances, it will be difficult to get admitted as a swami, although I am not a swami of the rascal group. We have to prove it by action that this swami is not like those swamis. This remark was made by Mr. Alan Burke of the television company. He introduced me to the public as, "Here is a real swami." Alan Burke was a late-night TV show host, very controversial and very cutting. And I remember watching this episode. And this is very early on in the 60s. It's okay. You can't hear it where? On the live stream you can't hear? All right. And he treated Srila Prabhupada very respectfully. It was very unusual, and everyone was wondering what happened to the real Alan Burke. How did he do? But Prabhupada did this not to everyone. Because he was genuine, he was very disarming. People had so many misconceptions about how, what a swami was, or what he should say, or how he should act. But there was never a situation where we saw Srila Prabhupada ever, except in Paris. In Paris, he was heavily challenged by the anarchists and the communists. They were ignorant rascals. They didn't know. But they were young, and they didn't really hear anything. And so they had no basis to really judge who Prabhupada was. They just wanted to cut everyone down who was in a position of authority. Didn't matter what authority you were. They just had it for all authority, as it is now in many respects. So he introduced me to the public as, "Here is a real swami." Respectful compliments. Anyway, I am not after respectful compliments by the public, but I am concerned more about my disciples. I want to see them quite able to preach the sublime doctrine of Krishna consciousness, and therefore I wish to stay. Otherwise, I am not attracted for any place, either hell or heaven. Prabhupada accepted the denial of permanent residency in the United States as Krishna's desire and blessings. Now, instead of returning to the U.S., he would go to London and the European continent. Mukunda, Shamsundar, and other disciples in San Francisco had asked Prabhupada if they could open a center in London, and on June 7th, Prabhupada replied, "As a sannyas, I should not fix up a certain place and take your service comfortably. It is not the desire of Krishna. He wants me traveling throughout the whole world, throughout the whole western part of the world. And therefore, I think it is Krishna's desire that now I shall start my activities, at least for some time, in the European countries. So it is almost certain that I am going to London by the month of August. And if you all wish to come there, then you can prepare for the trip." Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Very nice to see how this Krishna consciousness movement unfolded in various stages. Prabhupada took everything as Krishna mercy, regardless of the circumstances. So here he's denied. Many people would say, "Oh, my chances are lost. My visa has been denied." There may be many here who get that same situation, right? Occasionally you may think, "Oh, my visa has been denied. Now what would I do? I have to go back to India or wherever." But if you take it, if you understand that this is all Krishna's plan, you don't take it in a negative way, you take it in a positive way. What is that people often say? Make the best use of a bad bargain. All right? Even Prabhupada had occasionally indicated that. All right? A blind uncle is better than no uncle. So there's a similar situation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, 9th chapter, text 3. Chapter titled, Dhruva Maharaj Returns Home. Tadarsanena agata sarva sakshitav. Tadarsanena agata sarva sakshitav. Avandatangam vinamaya dandavat. Avandatangam vinamaya dandavat. Jigbhyam prapasyan prapiban ivabakas. Jigbhyam prapasyan prapiban ivarbakas. One more time. Jigbhyam prapasyan prapiban ivarbakas. Tumbani Bashena Bujari Baslisan. Tumbani Bashena Bujari Baslisan. Please chant. Varbakas. Tumbani Bashena Bujari Vaslisan. Tadarshinen agata sada sakshitav. Avandatangang vinamaya dandavat. Jigbhyang prapasyan prapibani varbakas. Chumbani vashena bujari vaslisan. Avanditangang vinamaya dandavat. Jigbhyang prapasyan prabhibani varpakas. Yumbani vasen pujari vasishan. Tadasanena gata sarva sakshitav. Avandatangang vinamaya dandavat. Rigbhyam prapajyan prabhibani varpakas. Chumbani vasena pujari vasishan. Tadasanena gata sarva sakshitav. Avandatangam vinamaya dandavat. Rigbhyam prapasyan prapibani varpakas. Tumbani vasena pujar vaslishan. Anyone else? Tadasanena gata sarva sakshitav. Avandatangang vinamaya dandavat. Jigbhyam prapasyan prapibani varpakas. Tumban agashena puja ivashlashan. Tadasanena. After seeing the Lord, Agata Sadvasa, Dhruva Maharaj being greatly confused, Jito on the ground, Avandata offered obeisances, Angam his body, Vinamaya prostrating, Dandavat just like a rod. Shivala Govindadev ki jai. Jigbhyam with his eyes, Prapasyan looking upon, Prapiban drinking, Eva like, Arbaka the boy, Chumban kissing, Eva like, Asyena with his mouth, Ujai with his arms, Eva like, Ashlisan embracing. Translation and purport by Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. When Dhruva Maharaj saw his Lord just in front of him, he was greatly agitated and offered him obeisances and respect. He fell flat before him like a rod and became absorbed in love of Godhead. Dhruva Maharaj in ecstasy looked upon the Lord as if he were drinking the Lord with his eyes, kissing the lotus feet of the Lord with his mouth, and embracing the Lord with his arms. Please repeat. When Dhruva Maharaj saw his Lord just in front of him, he was greatly agitated and offered him obeisances and respect. He fell flat before him like a rod and became absorbed in love of Godhead. Dhruva Maharaj in ecstasy looked upon the Lord as if he were drinking the Lord with his eyes, kissing the lotus feet of the Lord with his mouth, and embracing the Lord with his arms. Purport. Who's scrolling? Who's in charge of scrolling? Thank you, Sandesh. Naturally, when Dhruva Maharaj personally saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face, he was very much agitated in awe and respect. and it appeared as if he were drinking the entire body of the Lord with his eyes. The devotee's love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so intense that he wants to kiss the lotus feet of the Lord constantly, and he wants to touch the tips of the toes of the Lord and constantly embrace his lotus feet. All these features of Dhruva Maharaj's bodily expression indicate that upon seeing the Lord face to face, he developed the 8 kinds of transcendental ecstasy in his body. Om Jnana Tamandasya Gananjana Shlakaya Chaksho Anutamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vatsalam Pangum Lankai Tegaram Yat Kripatamaham Shri Gurum. So this is very interesting, this description and how it's presented, because it also gives us a point of view from the Lord's perspective. We're reading this description. It's not Dhruva Maharaj, but this is the meditation of the Sri Galagya, the great saintly personality of Vyasadeva and others in different scriptures, but here specifically. So we understand that not necessarily from our perspective. How do we show genuine appreciation, affection, and love for the Lord? What is our demeanor? Do we go before the altar and cross our arms like it says in a nectar devotion we should not do? Or hold our elbows, or hold our knees? These are all very familiar poses that don't demonstrate to the Lord what is our genuine emotional condition. We have to be very conscious. It's like Archer Tabu was reminding me the other day that Krishna is standing there holding his flute and his 2 fingers are up. Prabhupada said, those 2 fingers are looking at you. Angana yasya sakalendriya briti mati. Krishna sees and can do anything with any part of his body. So it's not that you're standing here on this side and Krishna can't see you, or I'm not in his direct line of vision. Krishna is seeing everything with every molecule. There's no molecule, but every part of his body. We think in terms of atomic structure. But everything is actually Krishna. And when we say atomic structure, we are just trying to minimize the fact that Krishna is the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's our way of, as material scientists, to try to pose ourselves as knowledgeable. But this is all a false premise. We can't understand unless Krishna wants us to understand. That his, and he says, Bhakti Mama Bijanati, Yavanshastat. So he gives us some indication how the devotees are dear to him. But they have to know how to behave. They have to know how to interact with the Lord. It is not that Krishna is obliged, like the karma monks today think, no, like when child Krishna was arguing with Nanda Maharaj, that Indra is pouring rain everywhere, even on the ocean. What's the point of making a separate sacrifice? He was putting forth very logical arguments that you don't have to appease this person, this demigod. He's not very, how can you say, correct in his behavior. Right? Because this, and he used that as an example, that he's pouring water even on the ocean. Ocean doesn't need water, at least from child Krishna's perspective, for the sake of argumentation. But we understand that this is just the Lord's way of making us appreciate that this is, it is not an automatic response. Krishna says, Yeyatamam prapadyante. Says, as you surrender unto me, I reward you accordingly. Prabhupada famously said in one lecture in Vrindavan, says, if you are for me 200 rupees, then I am for you 200 rupees. In respect to the fact that many retired persons, they leave all their wealth with their family, and they go to Vrindavan. My dear wife, my dear children, here for you is 2 lakhs, 2 crores. You just provide me 200 rupees. I'm going to Vrindavan. And so what will you give to Krishna with this 200 rupees? Simply going there to eat, to satisfy yourself. You know, everybody goes for darshan. What does darshan mean? It means to see God, right? People come for darshan all the time, they see God. But what do they see? What do their eyes see? And Prabhupada many times said that. You know, you want to see God, but can you? Premanjana charita bhakti vilochane. Do you have the qualification? Do you have the eyes to see? And so we should not be in a position where we're trying to make some reciprocation based on material calculation. Krishna is demanding full surrender. You know, and everyone's thinking, oh, it's a gradual process. No, not a gradual process. That famous clip Prabhupada said in Melbourne, Australia, the devotee was asking, how long does it take? And Prabhupada said, 1 minute. Then he said, not 1 minute, 1 moment. 1 moment. So many devotees have had this experience. Those who, with the greatest longevity, have had this experience. Yasya Devi Parabhaktir Yata Deve Tataguru. That upon meeting Srila Prabhupada, Vani or Vapu, they became immediately connected. It wasn't a gradual process. It wasn't that, well, I have to listen, I have to go to this lecture, I have to say. No, because this connection is something which is beyond material, how can you say, introduction. Why do Srila Prabhupada's books have such a great impact? What does it mean when we have the Lilamrita and it says planting the seed? Right? Who planted that seed? All right, Chaitanya Bhagavata describes very clearly that Prabhupada is the Senapati Bhakt. That he's come to reclaim all these scattered seeds that have sprouted here and there. And you see what he's doing here in that additional pastimes. He understands that, okay, Krishna has given me an opportunity, what? To go to Europe. And what happened in Europe? The London Temple opened. Such an impact on the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Meeting and impressing the Beatles. As a result, Krishna book was published. All these things have, you can see them. So there's nothing haphazard about or accidental. No, Krishna just arranged it. And Prabhupada understood it very clearly. He wasn't lamenting. He didn't waste a month thinking, oh, what to do, what to do, what to do. Sometimes we see that. Devotees get frustrated and they get bewildered. And they can't, how can you say, think what to do, what not to do. And this is that definition of bewilderment. But if one has this attitude of surrender, then Krishna immediately provides a solution. He says, whatever you want, Krishna, I can't understand your plan necessarily. But whatever you want, just reveal to me. And for many, that was also the first introduction to, how can you say, coming in contact with Srila Prabhupada. Devotees were so frustrated in the material world that they begged God, not knowing even who he was or what he was, that whatever you want me to do, please give some sign. And then miraculously, and even though in the Henry Street Temple, at the height of the, just before we moved, or just before the press moved in June of 75, there were 130 devotees living in this brownstone in Borum Hill there. People thought there were thousands of devotees because they saw them everywhere. In the airports, in the streets, in every shopping area, Herald Square, this place, that place, subways. And that's another reason why people thought there were so many, because they were always in the subway. And they would pass out this small pamphlet, Reservoir of Pleasure. And this Reservoir of Pleasure had a great impact. Just this very small pamphlet, few pages, had 2 essays in it. One was Reservoir of Pleasure, and the other one was, Who is Crazy? Has everyone read those too? You've read that essay, Who is Crazy? Arjuna is nodding. Yes. So this was the answer to many devotees' prayer. That's the point I'm making. That somehow or other, this was floating around like this. And so many persons were connected by this, and saw how effective it was to distribute. It was amazing how many people became devotees from that little pamphlet. Matter of fact, I was just hearing one guy brother on this Nam Ras podcast, Abhiram Prabhu. He also had that similar experience of receiving this reservoir of pleasure. And that caused him to look into Krishna consciousness. So it just depends on your point in your life when you're ready to surrender. Then you will have the greatest return on your investment. If you're just casually looking, you're not really, how can you say, thinking of making a commitment, and spirituality is just something passing, and you're not really serious about it, then it won't make as great an impact on your consciousness. Just like so many other things that you don't pay attention to. And what happens is that what is the term? It becomes a fad, a passing interest. Nothing serious. We see that Dhruva Maharaj here, he was meditating so intensely, as Maharaj was saying yesterday, that because of this intensity, because the universe was basically choking, the Lord said the only way he could stop him was to disappear from his internal meditation and appear to him externally. And so in some way, this parallels many of our experience, that we had this desire, but we had no visualization. And it's very difficult to grasp something unless you see it from all angles of vision. That is one of the definitions of realization, right? Gyan, Vigyan, knowledge and wisdom. So that's Pratyaksha Bhagamam Dharmyam. That this is the perfection of religion. Why? Because it's practically realized. And so here we have this situation with Dhruva Maharaj, that he immediately, when he realized that the Lord was gone, just like many of us in a dream, he was still trying to meditate. But the Lord had disappeared, so he wasn't coming back in that respect. So it doesn't say how long. We don't know. Was it minutes? Was it hours? Was it days? How long did he continue to try to meditate on the Lord's form? But at a certain point, when he opened his eyes, not that the Lord tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, I'm over here." He wanted Dhruva Maharaj to awaken on his own, to open his eyes on his own. And so this is a conscious endeavor. So in the same way, Krishna is ready to reveal himself to us. You know, what Prabhupada said many times that you have to, don't try to see Krishna, but act in such a way that Krishna will see you. And those are actually instructions given to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada's disciples. And Prabhupada is just passing it along to us. So this is such, and interestingly, it's not that Prabhupada related everything that he heard from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, but certain points were so perfectly presented that if one just hears them and remembers them, he can guide his whole path in Krishna consciousness like a bright beam. Om Jnana Tamaranda Shagananjala Shlaka. Spiritual Master is revealing knowledge to us. He's not making it up. He's not giving some adaptation with flowery language like the rascal swamis that Prabhupada described there. No. That's the definition of these rascal swamis. That Prabhupada was even sympathetic with the U.S. government. That he would also act in the same manner. Why? Because they're actually killers of the soul. They poison the living entity with these false notions of spirituality and completely divert them off the path of self-realization, perhaps for millions of births. This human form of life is so valuable. Dhruva Maharaj was so fortunate. Who can imagine? You know, under the circumstances. We cannot imitate. But we can emulate. We can follow in the Lord's footsteps by developing this intense meditation to keep within our hearts this vision of the Lord's lotus feet. Everyone has them. We're seeing them every day. But if you don't embrace them internally, then how will you develop this love for your Ishta Devata? And if you don't know what your Ishta Devata is at this point, then you have to be very careful because there may be some confusion. You know, we have at different stages, you know, in Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, there may be some functional conception based on our neophyte realization. But it's not that Krishna is ever less because of our ignorance. And when we realize that, we can honestly approach the Lord sincerely, offer prayers feelingly, and in this way increase our attachment. Otherwise, why has Krishna kindly, you know, descended in this Archa Vigraha form? You know, it's just to be ignored, just to get some official service. It has nothing to do. That separates the Kanishta from the next stage, that he just rings the bell without any understanding. So Prabhupada he wasn't condemning deity worship. He wasn't saying that just because let the neophytes ring the bell, that this is not an important aspect of our spiritual advancement. No. But he was indicating that if we don't understand why we're serving the Lord in this capacity, it's His mercy upon us. And it's our opportunity to develop that relationship which will carry us through our entire spiritual journey. But it will also lead to, what Prabhupada gave us this term, razor's edge. Familiarity breeds contempt. It is not eye exercise. Right? Everyone knows that story. Prabhupada relates in an assembly of devotees, ostensibly, hearing the lecture from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in one of the 64 branches of the Gaudiya Math. And just as we have here, the curtains close, then the deities are dressed after Mangalartik, and then again they're open. And so at one point, the curtains opened in the middle of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's lecture. And one person got up from the lecture, because in the temple you have the you have the Kirtan Mandap, you have the Darshan Mandap. Mandap means the area in the temple where the Kirtan goes on in this particular area. The Darshan goes on in this particular area. And the lecture hall is also there. So someone got up from where he was seated, and he went to the Darshan Mandap in front of the deities. Means he turned his back on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and walked to the front. It's like Srila Prabhupada is sitting there. And then after a few minutes, he came back and sat down again with the assembly of devotees. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada said, "So, what did you see?" And so the person began to describe what you could only describe as the visual elements of darshan. Oh, Krishna was wearing a nice golden mukut. He had a bangsi made from such and such material, wearing such and such colored dress. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta then said, simply eye exercise. Simply eye exercise. He's ignoring the words of the pure devotee. Yasya Devi Parabhakti Yata Deve Tatagaru. What will he get? What is his benefit from his defective vision? But yet some people will go, even in the middle of Guru Puja, sometimes you see people walk up to the altar and just stare there. Turn their backs on Srila Prabhupada. Understand, as if Krishna will give them something independently of Srila Prabhupada's mercy. Guru Krishna Kripai Bhai Bhakti. You can't get anything without the mercy of the spiritual master. Your eyes will simply fool you. And what will you remember? When we concentrate on the Lord's lotus feet, it's not that we see that His feet never change. He can change His dress 3 times a day. but his lotus feet never change. So if you meditate on his lotus feet, you don't have to consider any other aspect. And you'll be completely protected, preserved, and satisfied. And in any moment of weakness, if you remember that, you're trying to remember the entire picture of what everyone on the altar is wearing, you'll simply be bewildered. Now I say, wait a second, let me get out my phone and look to remember Krishna. No. At the time of death, you don't know where you'll be, whether you'll have access to this or that. Devotees make special arrangements. I remember when my godbrother Buddhimanta, who was the first big book distributor, he had developed brain cancer. They'd literally taken out a huge section of his brain. The whole skull was collapsed because there was nothing there. They didn't put a plate in. He came to Vrindavan and he was still lucid. Every day he would go to the front in the Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg, and he would take books, as he always had, a stack, and he would distribute on the road. People would give donations. It was very. He couldn't even tie a dhoti at that time. All he was wearing pajamas out on the road. So sincere was his desire to please Prabhupada that nothing could stop him. But at a certain point, he could no longer continue because, like I said, half his brain was missing. So, and the cancer was not gone, so it just kept progressing. And at a certain point, he became bedridden, and he didn't know who we were anymore. He didn't know anything. We had Prabhupada playing on a tape recorder, and over his bed, we had many BBT posters. None of them, they're in the books because they were all coming from the paintings. But this was one of the Super Soul, very famous print. And we had taped it to the ceiling because he couldn't even move. He would just stare at the ceiling, so we thought, okay, let's put this poster of the Super Soul above him so he could see. Even if he doesn't know, the Super Soul is there, and that vision is there. And Krishna will, at the right moment, whatever that time is, at least we can understand how important it is to have this vision within our hearts. So even before the temple, I had no clear conception of how, Krishna is so merciful that he descends in his arch of Vigraha. Because we're contaminated by material religion to think of icons or idols or this or that, the other thing. So. But the posters of Krishna that were available from the BBT, from ISKCON Press, if you look at the old posters, they have ISKCON Press, and it has the Brihat Madunga. But we used to have that at Tiffany Place. That was where we used to print the small books and the posters. My whole room was filled with these posters to get them at the store at Henry Street. And I would chant, meditating on these posters. And I could understand that just by expanding my consciousness to try to understand Krishna in his different aspects, that I was losing my hard-heartedness, this Mayavadi conditioning. You begin to appreciate that God is a person. And not just any person, but the supreme person. You have the universal form. You have so many of those posters. I even remember their placement in my room, where I had them, on which wall. So it's this is, but it begins from there, and that meditation increases when you finally realize how Krishna manifests himself for the devotees, not for just anyone who walks in off the street. They see what we originally saw. They see some nice carved statue, beautiful in many respects, but no appreciation for Krishna's supreme position. There was one friend of Srila Prabhupada, his father, sometimes you'll see there's one photo of Prabhupada in Mayapur, and Prabhupada's rubbing the head of this bushy-haired young man. And so he was the son of Prabhupada's friend in Allahabad. He was the newspaper owner. And so this son was also an MP. I used to come to the temple in Vrindavan, and we would go on some preaching programs. He would introduce us to people like that. He's very favorable. But they're not very, and they're Vaishnavas for generations and generations. And I remember one time when I was in Janpat, they have all the MP, the bungalows. They call them bungalows. And all the cottages where all the ministers have their residence during whenever there's a session and they have to be there for Parliament and this and that, the other thing. I remember he showed me, he said, I want to show you my deities. So I thought, okay, maybe he has an altar in a room and something like that. And he comes to me and he has a cigar box. Everyone knows what a cigar box is? Small cardboard box. Cigars used to come in. And in this box he has all these Sheilas, and they're just kind of like in there. They're not on cushions, they're just like as if a kid had a box of marbles. All these Sheilas, I folded my hands in deep respect, appreciate him, and this is, they've lost their connection of what the deity is. So much so that, when we first went to Vrindavan in the early days, Prabhupada, and we didn't understand what the implication was. And Prabhupada said that they used the Sheilas for cracking coconuts. This is how fallen these so-called swamis have become. So we pray that our society, that Prabhupada so carefully maintained and preserved, that there should never be such degradation, that the deities should never be so neglected, that Radha Govinda's fame is spread all over the three worlds, that we're known for our great care and attention. We've inherited these deities directly from Srila Prabhupada. He personally installed them. They're not ordinary in any sense of the word. And we can see how their fame is already spread through the various personalities who took shelter of them and then, by their mercy, became empowered by Srila Prabhupada and by Radha Govinda to help spread this movement. So many, the artists, all the BBT paintings, so many of them were done under the care and guidance and inspiration of Radha Govinda. The whole painter's workshop. So many artists. So unless you carefully consider every aspect of what they have overseen, they means Radha Govinda, then you can't fully appreciate their potency. And you minimize that potency at your own risk. If you think, well, let me come in, Don't neglect the spiritual master's instructions. Don't become familiar with the spiritual master or the deity. This is Prabhupada's instruction stuff. Don't become familiar. Take them both as seriously as you can consciously endeavor. In other words, don't do anything half-heartedly. This is not a society for people who are not fully committed. Because you will not get the full realization. You will, and it will affect you. And don't be sentimental with the deity with eye exercise. Just seeing how nicely. They're not there for your pleasure. But they're giving you an opportunity to engrave their mercy, darshan, in your heart. So you should feel that. How merciful they are to me, such a fallen rascal. They have the opportunity that at least let me try to please them in some capacity, whatever capacity I have. And that genuine sincerity will manifest gradually into full surrender. You know, at that point, wonderful things happen. You know, one's faith, one's commitment, everything becomes crystallized. It is not just some snap of the fingers and some magic. But in one sense, it is. Because at any moment, Krishna can give you this mercy in the form of pratyaksha bhagamam dhamyam. This practical realization, this tangible, conscious realization that I am an eternal servant of Krishna, that I am in the perfect position to execute my dharma. I don't need to do anything separately from serving Krishna here and there in the temple in some capacity. But if Krishna wants me to do something for him, I'm happy to surrender to that point. That has to be always there. That I'm not looking for anything separate. I'm not looking for profit, distinction, or adoration. Right? Nadanam, najanam, nasundarim. Why is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saying these things? Because he wants us to get to that point. Aslishiva padratam panastuma. The progression is there. But one has to develop this real, genuine emotion. It's not, we say yes, that at a certain point, and one has to be extremely careful that it is not artificial. This, what we call sentiment, what is described in the Shastra as, bhav. This emotion is a gift. It's like after years in a relationship, one may finally understand what it means to love someone or something. Initially, it is not there, especially in original culture, where people are married basically sight unseen. So where is the love? The love develops as the relationship progresses through various stages. The same as our relationship with Krishna and the spiritual master develops by faith, commitment, duty, honor. This grows the love until it crystallizes and becomes fixed. And then when it's fixed, one gets the benefit of that love. There's this mutual reciprocation. It is not a one-sided relationship. Krishna can give it to you anytime, but we have this hard heart that needs to be thoroughly cleansed. And then once that happens, and it doesn't happen by accident. Sometimes we hear that there's Nitya Siddha, Sadhan Siddha, Kripa Siddha. Yes, if one goes out of his way, does something extraordinary for the spiritual master Krishna, he can get that mercy. We've seen how Prabhupada had given that mercy to certain individuals to allow them to do something wonderful. But just as they easily or difficult as they received it, it was also withdrawn. So you have to be able to keep it. Not just that you can get it. Everyone has received Krishna's mercy. The fact that we're here, sitting here, getting the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by the mercy of the Spiritual Master, that Guru Krishna Kripai Bhai. That progression is there. But you have to keep it. You cannot become complacent, cannot become familiar. And the only way to do that is to constantly look for the opportunity to serve. Not to think, it is not a part-time thing, devotional service. Sometimes you think, well, I'll do this. Why do we see that only under certain circumstances that those of us in the Grahastha ashram, it is so much more difficult? Why do Prabhupada and all the acharyas emphasize brahmacharya? Because Grahastha life is a diversion, it's a distraction, it's a division. Right? Even in the Bible it says you cannot serve two masters. And so there's allowance that one can execute his duty as a Grahastha, but at a certain point he must take Vanaprastha. It is not an option. If it remains embedded in that griyam andakupam, then his human life is again wasted. Matirna Krishna paratak svatova amito vipadyeti grihavatanam adanti gobir bishatam tamisham punak punas chavata chavana. And so we're getting the benefit vicariously, but it can become practical. It can become realized knowledge in that specific aspect. That by seeing others in similar situations, we learn the pitfalls of household life. And hopefully we learn the exit strategy. When sometimes it says 50, but what do people say nowadays? People say 60 is the new 50, or 50 is the new 40. So everyone makes allowances like this. But the point is, at some point you must do it. Because why? Because we promised the spiritual master full fidelity. And so if you took a sabbatical or to do something else, to raise the family, once the sons are old enough to take charge, you have no excuse anymore. What is your excuse? I like my nice, comfortable situation. I don't have temple president, breathing down my neck, or the GBC, or everyone else that thinks that they're my authority. Kids have that saying. Don't be like a kid. I remember raising my children and others' children, their friends and circle. They would say things like, "You're not the boss of me." How am I not the boss? I feed you. I put clothes on your back. I put a roof over your head. How I'm not the boss of you? But they say that. And what's the other thing they say? They say, I didn't ask to be born. But this is just something out of ignorance. Of course you didn't ask to be born here. But you're here, so what are you going to do about it? So this is the situation. Sometimes we have to encounter such arguments like this. And we have to tolerate. Because we know that Krishna, from within their heart, so that's why we engage those who come to the temple in devotional service. Because this Chaita Darpana Marjanam Bhava Mahadavadinava, cleansing of the heart, will gradually reveal to them their original identity. That sensation that I am a servant of Krishna. Once they get that sensation, they can take it to the extent they're able to, and hopefully they will bring it to fruition at a certain point. This is every parent's desire to see their children successful. And for devotees, they want to see their children successful in spiritual life. They don't care about whether they become a doctor or a lawyer, Indian chief. No, they don't care about these things. They simply want to see, just like the spiritual master, just like Prabhupada wanted everybody to be happy in Krishna consciousness. He wasn't telling us, okay, you should continue college. He specifically said no. When Nayana Brahm asked Prabhupada if he should, continue his education in film and this and that, Prabhupada said, absolutely not. But Nayana didn't take Prabhupada seriously in that respect. And he continued to put himself in that situation. But we have to be careful. We think that the spiritual master may not understand things according to our perspective of time and circumstances. This is a great offense to think that the spiritual master is just some ordinary living entity whose decisions are based on, Kala, Desha, Patra, time, place, or circumstance. No. So anyway, we have the benefit of seeing this perspective, how Krishna was, how the Lord here was viewing Dhruva Maharaj at that moment of awakening. The Lord is only waiting for that same moment from all of us, when we're fully awakened to our relationship, that we are embracing the Lord with our heart in every respect, and making a commitment, making a promise. We took a vow. Those of us who are initiated, we took that vow that we will faithfully serve. And so one's spiritual advancement is tied to that vow. So he has to protect it very carefully. The bhakti letta beads and the vow are in many ways synonymous. And so it's not that, you can ignore one or the other and expect to be successful. And if you have eyes to see, then you can look around and observe others who have strayed from the path. What was the cause? Familiarity, disrespect, offenses, laziness in the matter of following one's vow, not able to make the connection and correlation between service and the clean heart. Krishna is not, this whole building is simply a vehicle for service. It's not simply four walls and a roof. It may appear that way, but it is simply a vehicle by which we can interact with the Lord. This is his paraphernalia, to Dhyanam. Is non-different from him. To the extent that we appreciate that, to that extent we will respond and reciprocate accordingly. Right? When Prabhupada said that if you clean this pot, you clean your heart, it was not just Prabhupada's way of tricking us into washing pots. He has no business tricking anybody. He was giving us the absolute truth. That you can become self-realized simply by this endeavor. And everyone who's done it understands that this is a very accelerated means to clean the heart. And the heart is filthy from millions and millions of births, filled with misconceptions that are like coverings over the material, over the spiritual consciousness. Gradually poking through every once in a while and disturbing our attempts to become self-realized. I say, oh, but wait, this is not exactly how I think it should be. What? Prabhupada said that if a person begins a sentence with think or has it in it, he should finish it in a closet. I think this, maybe this, perhaps this. They're all speculations and conjecture. So we have to eliminate all these and just refer to the scripture. Shastra Chakshu. Fix our eyes. Premanjana Charita Bhakti Balochana. We have to use that salve. And that salve is devotional service. It's not that. I'm not that I can, like Dhruva Maharaj, yes, we want to embrace the Lord's lotus feet. We may even have that sufficient humility, genuine emotion that we want to kiss the Lord's lotus feet. But that is a highly advanced position. And if you can't even clean the temple or clean the pots, how can you expect to progress to that level? I think, no, this service is not suitable for me. I'm looking for something more, how can you say, spiritual in my conception. I want to just dress the deities, or I want to just do this for the deities. No. Krishna will award you that opportunity if you're sincere, no doubt. But it will not happen unless you get to that point of surrendering to other aspects of service. Because if you're still making distinctions, even after Prabhupada has clearly described that the pot washer and the pujari are non-different. How can he say such a thing? And how can we not understand that and still hold these misconceptions? It's all due to the cleaning process of the heart. So don't neglect the cleaning process in any respect, in any aspect. Don't try to avoid it. To that extent you avoid it, you'll hamper your spiritual path. Any questions or comments or concerns? Bhakta Michael. Yeah, loud, Michael. If something is, well, it just depends. If the heart is naturally clean, but it's covered with millions of years of dirt, maybe Krishna is giving us a special project. There was one along that line of saying something. There's like you can't clean coal. Prabhupada commented one time about the devotees who were repeatedly making similar mistakes and falling down. And so he said, just like washing coal. So what happens when you wash coal? It just gets blacker and blacker. You can't wash it. All right? And it's not some futile task like is portrayed in some of our studies of mythology, where there's impossible tasks given. No. Everything has a solution. Everything has a purpose. If we wanted to clean this temple, if everyone had the eyes of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, Prabhupada saw things. What did he say? What's that famous story? I see, but you don't see. You know that story in Vrindavan? So in Vrindavan, you after Mangalarti, you go and you circumambulate the temple. And you walk around, and there's a section in the back of the temple where it connects Prabhupada's quarters and the temple proper. So there's an overhang, and you walk underneath it. Everyone who's been to Vrindavan knows that. And so after Mangalarti gets dark, and so that is a low overhead. So there's a light, so you don't bump your head as you walk up the stairs to come out the other end to that side entrance to the temple. So all the devotees are following Prabhupada around. And very soon, the light from the dawn, it's not full sun, but it's light. And so Prabhupada walks around and he stops right on the other side of that where you exit that underpass. And he puts his cane down and he says, I see, but you don't see. The devotees are thinking Prabhupada is articulating something very profound. Of course, the spiritual master could see. So he sees Krishna. But nobody questioned anything. Prabhupada started walking again. And he came around the temple again for the second time. And he said, and of course, for those in the audience who have heard this story, I apologize for repeating it. But there's always new people to hear it. So he comes around again, he says, I see, but you don't see. And the devotees are a little more bewildered. Because Prabhupada is obviously making a point. And we're so dull, we can't understand it. And he keeps walking. Comes around again. By this time, it's fully bright. And as he comes to that point, he says, again, I see, but you don't see. And the devotees are saying, Prabhupada, what is it? What do you see? What should we see that you see? And Prabhupada took his cane and he pointed at the burning light bulb. Said, why? Why is this light burning? It's a minuscule amount of electricity, but it's unnecessary. It's burning for no purpose. It's now light, it's not dark. You have full vision by the mercy of the sun. So this is Prabhupada's point. So he's seeing what we don't see. We have to develop Prabhupada's vision. Those of us who have progressed, it wasn't our choice to become temple commander. We were appointed by the temple authority. Why? Sometimes because we were expert at cleaning. Or not expert, but diligent. And so therefore they said, oh, he can do this. And so then it came down by the parampara. One temple commander gives it to another temple commander or temple president offers it. There was no question of accepting or rejecting. Now people say, no, I don't want to do that service. What does that indicate? You're getting an opportunity to see through Prabhupada's eyes, or to develop Prabhupada vision. We could call it Prabhupada vision. How you see the temple, how he would see it. What needs to be cleaned. What needs to be repaired, what needs to be fixed. So if you purposely walk around with blinders because I don't want the responsibility, I don't want to see it, because I don't want to bend down and pick it up, that's entirely up to you. Krishna put that there just for you to see and take action and responsibility. But you don't have to, because you're an independent living entity. And you can think, no, it's not my job. Bhakta so-and-so will do it. Or someone else will do it. Or nowadays, the paid sweeper will do it. This is an abomination. That the paid sweeper is getting devotional service on a level that many devotees will never get, because they won't do it. Would be a great disappointment in Prabhupada's eyes. So let's not disappoint the spiritual master. Let's try to clean that which doesn't seem like it can be cleaned. I sympathize with Bhakta Michael. I know areas like that. What did Bhakta Dustin say yesterday about the area underneath the fire stairwell where all the garbage is piled up? It's very appropriate, because Bhakta Dustin has a great sense of reality. He said, I'm in the dungeon, because the stairs are like bars and they cast a similar shadow. I'm in the dungeon of the fire stairwell, breaking down the boxes. So we should pray to Krishna that I can also have the opportunity to be in that dungeon, doing service for him. Like Prabhupada said, and the additional pastimes. Heaven or hell, it doesn't matter. But we have to be able to do it. That's the key. We have to prepare ourselves to do service under any circumstances. Not that only according to my conception. Then it's not ahoitikiya pratiyata. It becomes conditional devotional service, not unconditional. All right, we're going a little long on the class. Bhakta Michael, was that okay? Any last words or comments? Thank you all for having the patience to sit through another temple president lecture. They're all basically the same. You know, this is a burden of love. You know, I hope that at some point everyone has the opportunity. You may think it's a curse. Oh, I'll never do that service. No, I see that. But Prabhupada gave so much special attention to those who took responsibility, because he felt that they were genuinely trying to relieve him of the burden of management so he could translate. And we may not feel that same impetus now, but yet we understand the concept, and that how we temple presidents are facilitating Prabhupada's mission. Make sure that everything is available to those who want to fully surrender. So Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada additional pastimes, Lilamrita ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki.